Good evening, everybody, or actually, in my case, good very, very early morning to you all. This is a special edition of Pop Up Rhetoric video, and in this one I am having a look at three rhetorical devices that you see repeatedly throughout the September 26 Trump-Clinton presidential debates. The devices that we're going to look at today you see thrown around all the time in internet forums, and they happen constantly when people are trolling. So they're usually lumped under terms like logical fallacies, and generally when we see these devices being used, we say, oh, that's really, really bad. You should never, ever do that in an argument. But the reality is that red herrings, straw man arguments, and ad hominem attacks are actually really important in rhetoric and in persuasive argumentation, especially when you're dealing with political rhetoric and political debate and persuasion. What are these devices? A red herring is when someone throws out an irrelevant, or usually in political debates, a distracting argument that's intended to redirect the audience's attention away from the issue that they're actually supposed to be arguing about. There's many, many different forms of red herrings out there, and they are scattered throughout the debates. They're used constantly. A straw man attack is when someone puts out a new argument that is easier for them to attack than the actual issue that they're supposed to be discussing. So a straw man attack is a form of a red herring, and it's effectively a way that they can make themselves sound like they're on the attack without actually addressing the issue that they're supposed to be talking about, because it's just too darn hard to do so. And finally, we get an ad hominem attack. Ad hominem attacks are attacks against someone personally. They're attacks against an individual's character. And in politics, character or ethos, the propriety of someone being in the position that they're in, or the sense of rightness that they're the ones who are going to be ascending to office, is really, really important. So ad hominem attacks, even though they're kind of considered a dirty trick in most arguments, when it comes to the political stage, they're actually really critical to throw out there, because ad hominem attacks create distrust in voters. It makes us question the person's integrity, to question their character. So we're going to be looking at these three devices, and we're only going to be looking at them in a clip that's, I think I've got the clip at about 7 minutes long or so. So we're going to be looking to see how many times Clinton and Trump throw out these three rhetorical devices in a very compressed period of time. I'm going to be giving a little bit of narration throughout the pop-up video, and of course, you will see the pop-ups coming up whenever you are encountering either that red herring, the ad hominem, or the straw man attacks. Enjoy.
Taxes. The fundamental difference between the two of you concerns the wealthy. Secretary Clinton, you're calling for a tax increase in the wealthiest Americans. I'd like you to further defend that. And Mr. Trump, you're calling for tax cuts for the wealthy. I'd like you to defend that. And this next 2-minute answer goes to you, Mr. Trump.
Well, I'm really calling for major jobs, because the wealthy are going to create tremendous jobs. They're going to expand their companies. They're going to do a tremendous job. I'm getting rid of the carried interest provision. And if you really look, it's not a tax. It's really not a great thing for the wealthy. It's a great thing for the middle class. It's a great thing for companies to expand. And when these people are going to put billions and billions of dollars into companies, and when they're going to bring $2.5 trillion back from overseas, where they can't bring the money back because politicians like Secretary Clinton won't allow them to bring the money back because the taxes are so onerous and the bureaucratic red tape is so bad. So what they're doing is they're leaving our country, and they're, believe it or not, leaving because taxes are too high and because some of them have lots of money outside of our country, and instead of bringing it back and putting the money to work because they can't work out a deal and everybody agrees it should be brought back. Instead of that, they're leaving our country to get their money because they can't bring their money back into our country because of bureaucratic red tape, because they can't get together, because we have a president that can't sit them around a table and get them to approve something. And here's the
Okay, I'm going to stop it there for a second. Now, what he's done here is he's set up a straw man argument. And here's the thing, he still hasn't actually spoken about the issues that hold asked him about, which was to defend his notion of tax cuts for the wealthy. And instead, he switched his attack to something easier. And that's what we do when we're using a straw man attack. Like I said in the intro, it's really, really common in debate. It's actually a very important tool in debate as well as in political rhetoric. So in this case, his straw man is the ineffective leader, that we have a president that can't sit around a table and get people to approve of stuff. That is what he's actually attacking, instead of the more difficult argument, which is defending his proposed policies regarding tax cuts for the wealthy. Now, let's watch a few more minutes, and he's going to try to argue the straw man even further. Let's get going here.
The thing, Republicans and Democrats agree that this should be done. $2.5 trillion. I happen to think it's double that. It's probably $5 trillion that we can't bring into our country, Lester. And with a little leadership, you'd get it in here very quickly, and it could be put to use on the inner cities and lots of other things, and it would be beautiful. But we have no leadership. And honestly, that starts with Secretary Clinton.
All right, you have...
Okay, I'm pausing it again here. So, like I said, he was doing a straw man attack, and his attack with straw man was actually President Obama. Because remember, what he was saying was that we have a president that can't sit around, that can't get people around a table, and that can't provide leadership. But he actually had to change his straw man, because in this case, his opponent, the person that he needs to be attacking, is not President Obama. It's Clinton. He needs to be attacking her. So he realized that halfway through his rant, and he switched his straw man over to Clinton. So, to be honest, I have no idea where the hell he's trying to go with all of this. I'm really wondering if I can even count the number of red herrings that he's throwing out as red herrings, because between the red herrings and the straw men and all of the various arguments that he's putting forth, I don't think he's using these as a rhetorical ploy. I think he's just talking off the top of his head and really doesn't have any idea what he wants to speak about. But for the sake of this exercise, we will carry on.
2 minutes on the same question to defend tax increases on the wealthiest Americans, Secretary Clinton.
I have a feeling that by the end of this evening, I'm going to be blamed for everything that's ever happened.
Why not?
Why not? Yeah, why not? You know, just join the debate by saying more crazy things. Now, let me say,
there's nothing crazy about not letting our companies bring their money back into their country.
This is Secretary Clinton's 2 minutes, please.
Yeah, well, let's start the clock again, Lester. We've looked at your tax proposals. I don't see changes in the corporate tax rates or the kinds of proposals you're referring to that would cause the repatriation, bringing back of money that's stranded overseas. I happen to...
Okay, I'm going to pause it again because I do want to look a little bit into this first red herring that now Clinton is throwing out. Remember, what Holt asked her to do back in his introduction of this topic was to defend her proposals for tax increases. Instead, she's redirected attention away from her platform and back towards Trump's. That's the red herring. She's throwing out this little tantalizing bit of talking about the kind of proposals that he's referring to and bringing back of money that's stranded overseas. She's directing our attention towards Trump's platform instead of explaining hers, which was what Holt asked her to do. That's the red herring.
Then you didn't read it.
I happen to support that in a way that will actually work to our benefit. But when I look at what you have proposed, you have what is called now the Trump loophole, because it would so advantage you and the business you do. You've proposed an approach that has a $4 billion tax benefit for your family. And when you look at what you are proposing, it is, as I said, trumped up trickle down. Trickle down did not work. It got us into the mess we were in 2008 and 9. Slashing taxes on the wealthy hasn't worked, and a lot of really smart, wealthy people know that. And they are saying, hey, we need to do more to make the contributions we should be making to rebuild the middle class. I don't think top-down works in America. I think building the middle class, investing in the middle class, making college debt-free so more young people can get their education, helping people refinance their their debt from college at a lower rate. Those are the kinds of things that will really boost the economy. Broad-based, inclusive growth is what we need in America.
Okay, once again, I just want to point out that second red herring that Clinton's now thrown out. This is a red herring because the argument is once again being reframed and the audience's attention is being distracted away from the question which was asked. Again, the question that was asked was to defend her proposals of tax increases for the wealthy. And instead, she's bringing their attention towards a much more popular topic, bringing down debt, making education more affordable, and strengthening the middle class, which has a very, very positive spin, a much more positive spin than the notion of tax increases for the wealthy, which, of course, a lot of the voters don't want to hear. So she never actually mentions what the role of tax increases on the wealthy are in terms of this lovely proposal that she has for lowering debt and strengthening the middle class. That's her red herring.
Not more advantages for people at the very top.
Mr. Trump,
Typical politician, all talk, no action, sounds good, doesn't work, never going to happen. Our country is suffering because people like Secretary Clinton have made such bad decisions in terms of our jobs and in terms of what's going on. Now, look, we have the worst revival of an economy since the Great Depression. And believe me, we're in a bubble right now. And the only thing that looks good is the stock market. But if you raise interest rates even a little bit, that's going to come crashing down. We are in a big, fat, ugly bubble. And we better be awfully careful. And we have a Fed that's doing political things. This Janet Yellen of the Fed. The Fed is doing political by keeping the interest rates at this level. And believe me, the day Obama goes off and he leaves and he goes out to the golf course for the rest of his life to play golf, when they raise interest rates, you're going to see some very bad things happen because the Fed is not doing their job. The Fed is being more political than Secretary Clinton.
Mr. Trump, we're talking.
I'm sorry I keep laughing. It really is like listening to word salad here. It's all over the place. This is terrible. But we'll have a look at the straw man again, because another straw man's been set up here. And in this case, it is the civil servants under the current administration. A really common ploy with politicians everywhere is to attack the civil servants of the current administration as being pawns of the establishment. And in this case, he's attacking Yellen and claiming that her treatment of the interest rates is politically motivated and motivated by, like I said, Obama's current administration. Once again, he's not defending his proposals of tax cuts for the wealthy, which was what Holt had initially asked about. So you can see here how those red herrings and the straw man arguments are actually quite similar. He's just set up a straw man, which is a form of red herring, really, of the current government that he can attack more easily than he can actually defend his own proposed policies.
Talking about the burden that Americans have to pay, yet you have not released your tax returns. And the reason nominees have released their returns for decades is that voters will know if their potential president owes money to, who he owes it to, and any business conflicts. Don't Americans have a right to know if there are any conflicts of interest?
I don't mind releasing. I'm under a routine audit, and it'll be released. And as soon as the audit's finished, it'll be released. But you will learn more about Donald Trump by going down to the federal elections, where I filed a 104-page, essentially financial statement of sorts, the forms that they have. It shows income. In fact, the income, I just looked today, the income is filed at $694 million for this past year. $694 million. If you would have told me I was going to make that 15 or 20 years ago, I would have been very surprised. But that's the kind of thinking that our country needs. When we have a country that's doing so badly, that's being ripped off by every single country in the world, it's the kind of thinking that our country needs, because everybody, Lester, we have a trade deficit with all of the countries that we do business with of almost $800 billion a year. You know what that is? That means who's negotiating these trade deals? We have people that are political hacks negotiating our trade deals.
The IRS says an audit of your taxes, you're perfectly free to release your taxes during an audit. And so the question, does the public's right to know outweigh your personal?
Well, I told you, I will release them as soon as the audit. Look, I've been under audit almost for 15 years. I know a lot of wealthy people that have never been audited. I said, do you get audited? I get audited almost every year. And in a way, I should be complaining. I'm not even complaining. I don't mind it. It's almost become a way of life. I get audited by the IRS, but other people don't. I will say this. We have a situation in this country that has to be taken care of. I will release my tax returns against my lawyer's wishes. When she releases her 33,000 emails that have been deleted, as soon as she releases them, I will release my tax returns, and that's against my lawyers. They say don't do it. I will tell you this. No, in fact, watching shows, reading the papers, almost every lawyer says you don't release your returns until the audit's complete. When the audit's complete, I'll do it. But I would go against them if she releases her email.
So it's negotiable?
It's not negotiable. No, let her release the email. Why did she delete 33,000?
Well, I'll let her ask that, but let me just admonish the audience one more time. There was an agreement. We did ask you to be silent, so it would be helpful for us. Secretary Clinton.
Well, I think you've just seen another example of bait and switch here. For 40 years, everyone running for president has released their tax returns. You can go and see nearly, I think, 39, 40 years of our tax returns, but everyone has done it. We know the IRS has made clear there is no prohibition on releasing it when you're under audit. So you've got to ask yourself, why won't he release his tax returns? And I think there may be a couple of reasons. First, maybe he's not as rich as he says he is. Second, maybe he's not as charitable as he claims to be. Third, we don't know all of his business dealings, but we have been told through investigative reporting that he owes about $650 million to Wall Street and foreign banks. Or maybe he doesn't want the American people, all of you watching tonight, to know that he's paid nothing in federal taxes, because the only years that anybody's ever seen were a couple of years when he had to turn them over to state authorities when he was trying to get a casino license, and they showed he didn't pay any federal income tax. So if he's paid zero, that means zero for troops, zero for vets, zero for schools or health. And I think probably he's not all that enthusiastic about having the rest of our country see what the real reasons are, because it must be something really important, even terrible, that he's trying to hide. And the financial disclosure statement, they don't give you the tax rate. They don't give you all the details that tax returns would. And it just seems to me that this is something that the American people deserve to see. And I have no reason to believe that he's ever going to release his tax returns, because there's something he's hiding. And we'll guess. We'll keep guessing at what it might be that he's hiding. But I think the question is, were he ever to get near the White House, what would be those conflicts? Who does he owe money to? Well, he owes you the answers to that, and he should provide them.
He also raised the issue of your emails. Do you want to respond to that?
I do. You know, I made a mistake using a private email.
That's for sure.
And if I had to do it over again, I would obviously do it differently. But I'm not going to make any excuses. It was a mistake, and I take responsibility for that.
Mr. Trump?
That was more than a mistake. That was done purposely, okay? That was not a mistake. That was done purposely. When you have your staff taking the Fifth Amendment, taking the Fifth so they're not prosecuted, when you have the man that set up the illegal server taking the Fifth, I think it's disgraceful. And believe me, this country thinks it's disgraceful. It really thinks it's disgraceful also. As far as my tax returns, you don't learn that much from tax returns, that I can tell you. You learn a lot from financial disclosure. And you should go down and take a look at that. The other thing, I'm extremely underleveraged. The report that said 650, which, by the way, a lot of friends of mine that know my business said, boy, that's really not a lot of money. It's not a lot of money relative to what I had. The buildings that were in question, they said in the same report, which was, actually it wasn't even a bad story, to be honest with you, but the buildings are worth $3.9 billion. And the 650 isn't even on that. But it's not 650, it's much less than that. But But I could give you a list of banks. I would, if that would help you, I would give you a list of banks. These are very fine institutions, very fine banks. I could do that very quickly. I am very underleveraged. I have a great company. I have a tremendous income. And the reason I say that is not in a braggadocious way. It's because it's about time that this country had somebody running it that has an idea about money. When we have $20 trillion in debt, and our country's a mess. You know, it's one thing to have $20 trillion in debt and our roads are good and our bridges are good and everything's in great shape. Our airports are like from a third world country. You land at LaGuardia, you land at Kennedy, you land at LAX, you land at Newark, and you come in from Dubai and Qatar and you see these incredible, you come in from China, you see these incredible airports, and you land, we've become a third world country. So, the worst of all things has happened.
Oh, there's
we owe $20 trillion,
not in
and
this
we're a
video. I'll
mess.
leave it
We
for
haven't
another
even
one.
started. And we've spent $6 trillion in the Middle East, according to a report that I just saw, whether it's 6 or 5, but it looks like it's 6. $6 trillion in the Middle East. We could have rebuilt our country twice. And it's really a shame. And it's politicians like Secretary Clinton that have caused this problem. Our country has tremendous problems. We're a debtor nation, we're a serious debtor nation, and we have a country that needs new roads, new tunnels, new bridges, new airports, new schools, new hospitals, and we don't have the money because it's been squandered on so many of your ideas.
Let you
And
respond,
maybe
and we'll move to our
because
next.
you haven't paid any federal income tax for a lot of years. And the other thing I think is important
It would
to
be
point out
squandered too,
is
believe me.
If your main claim,
I'm pausing it there. Oh my God. So what we were looking at tonight, all that we were looking at were red herrings, straw man arguments, and ad hominem attacks. And there were loads of them in there. I mean, look at the tallies down at the bottom. That is in just a few minutes of political debate. I didn't even touch on a whole raft of other rhetorical devices and techniques that were being thrown back and forth. Now, overall, I do think that Clinton understands and knows how to wield these techniques. She's a practiced politician. She's a practiced lawyer. She's an excellent debater. Trump is flying off the seat of his pants, it appears to me. I really can't put it any other way. But there's a lot going on here. You can see that just in a couple minutes. There's a lot going on with the way that we argue and the way that we build our arguments and defend our arguments. Whether or not the way that we build and defend them is even any good, it's still happening in the background, and it's still really good to keep your eye out for it. That being said, I'm going to cut it off there for tonight. Oh, God, I can't believe that I still have 2 more of these debates that I promised to record and do this for. Okay, time to wrap this up. Hope you enjoyed this special edition of Pop Up Rhetoric, and I will see you again in the next edition during the next debate. Bye-bye.